Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Yvonne from Ginger Chick Rehab. I am so glad to have you back today, and if you're new here and visiting my channel for the first time, welcome. I do lots of DIYs, trash to treasure, furniture flips with my husband Chris, and thrifting adventures, all to fit into the farmhouse decor. So in today's video, I am participating with the lovely Sonia of Domestic Diva. Has a very inspiring channel. She has her regular channel, Domestic Diva, and then she has her home channel. She does lots of DIYs and organizations and cleanings and cooking. You really, if this is your first time hearing of her, please go down in my description box and check out her channel. So in today's video, Sonia asked us to do a Pinterest inspired DIY, and I absolutely love this idea. I would like to take credit for some of the things that I do, but nope, I research Pinterest a lot along with Instagram, so I was very excited to get to participate in this challenge. So in today's video, I am doing 3 thrift inspired crafts. So what I did is I went to the thrift store, and if you're new to my channel, this is what I'm all about. I am a thrifter. So I go to Pinterest, I look up ideas of what I can do with my thrifted items. So today's 3 items actually have some chicken wire and some stenciling on them, so stay tuned to today's video. So here's some of my Pinterest inspirations. I absolutely love chicken wire, and I love it behind these spice racks. I love the words, especially on this spice rack. This has always been my inspiration, and I love, you know, how distressing of that white just makes those little details pop. So here's what one of the spice racks that I thrifted looks like. So you could see where it has some of the details on it, and then how I can put chicken wire behind it. And this one has this cute little drawer that I thought was 2, but it is only 1, and it was $4.09 at Goodwill. My next inspiration came from these bread boxes with chicken wire. I absolutely love redoing bread boxes, and I love when I can run across them. So these were some of the different shapes and the different ideas, and how just distressing them makes some of those details pop. So this is the one that I ran across for $4.09 in a Goodwill, and it had glass in it, so I'm interested to see when I get that taken apart. But I loved all the details. I love the little porcelain knob that it had on it, and it's pretty clean for the age of it, and it's a nice dark wood. So I always, when I type in chicken wire in Pinterest, I always run across these shelves. They're not, you know, spice racks, they are shelves. So I was curious to see my thrifting adventures if I could run across a shelf that I could put chicken wire behind. I absolutely love these inspirations. So here's the vintage shelf that I ran across for $4.09 at my local Goodwill. I absolutely love that it is vintage. I love the dark wood of it, and I love all the details of it. So the first thing I always start off with is I always start off removing any hardware and any price stickers that may on. And these little, I don't know if it was the size of them or they've been on there a while, these little knobs were hard to get off. I needed the assistance of my little gripper to get them to move. So now, taking the price sticker off this bread box, then I'm going to need to remove the porcelain knob. I love that that was a porcelain knob. And then the hinges have to be taken off too, and that glass. And when it comes to painting things, the more things you can take off and get a clean paint job, I feel is the better. So I have to say I was truly surprised by this piece of glass, that it was 2 pieces of glass, and that there were dried flowers in it. Now for this little vintage shelf, it had these little hangers, but I don't know if people hang like that anymore, or they want to see the screws, so I always take those off. And then you can tell it had a little bit of a gap, that it must have been dropped at one time, which that happens. And then, oh yes, I don't want to forget that $4.09 price tag. So I'm just going to stick a couple little staples in this little shelf to tighten it back up from, you know, years of just, you know, sometimes nails work their way out or it had been dropped. So since I was going to be filling in the screw, you know, where I removed the hangers, there's a couple little spots where like the previous must have missed when they nailed it. So I'm going to fill that in and let that dry just to give it a nice clean look. So then I forgot about these little hangers. You know, spice racks you can set on a counter or a hutch, or, you know, I guess they used to hang them on the wall a lot. So I always forget that they have these little hangers on them. So I just needed to pop those out before putting a little spackle on there to fill in those holes. And then looking over this bread box, it's in pretty good shape, but you know, the dark wood, you don't really see where all those little nails holes are, but once I paint it white, they will definitely pop out. So while I have the spackle, I'm doing two other things anyway. I'm gonna go ahead and fill in those holes. So when I went to sand my pieces, which, you know, where you're spackling, you need to sand that in and blend it in so it's nice and smooth so you have a clean paint job, I noticed that the spackle was turning a brownish yellow color, which meant when I get to my white paint, that will do the same thing. So that is the nice thing about filling up any holes with spackle, is you can tell if your item is going to yellow your white paint. So now I know I need to shellac these pieces. So then after getting all that spackle nice and smooth and any other spots that I felt needed to be sanded, I'm going to give these all a good cleaning of crud cutter, especially this bread box where you know it's been in the kitchen. So, you know, you want to make sure that you get these nice and clean. And then after you clean them, you need to make sure that they're thoroughly dry. I just set them in front of the fan, and because you don't want to start painting wet wood. So since I'm not removing any paint off of this hardware and I'm just cleaning these little hardware, I just do extremely hot water with a little bit of Dawn dish soap. That'll just get them nice and clean because I will be spraying these. So now that my hardware is thoroughly dry, I'm just giving them a fresh look with Rust-Oleum paint and primer in flat black. Then after I flipped the hinges over and the hardware was good and dry, I sealed them up with some polycrylic, a couple coats. You know, kind of like sealing the paint in with wax. You know, for me, sealing the hardware in with polycrylic is the same thing, just one extra step of making this product last longer. So because of that spackling yellowing, I am going to be giving these three pieces a couple coats of the shellac, and this just stops that yellowing from happening. And luckily it's a pretty quick dry. It takes about 5-10 minutes, I for it to dry. And the two coats are because, you know, you don't always completely get everything covered with the first coat. So with these three pieces that I am painting for my Pinterest inspiration, because they are already a very dark wood, I do not need to do a black underneath them, because that brown will show through, and then when I'm distressing them, also some of the light of the natural wood that the stain is not. If you're wondering why I'm not pre-painting black, that would be the reason. It all depends on how dark the wood, and in these three pieces I feel are pretty dark. So I'm just using my Kills paint and primer in one and giving them their coats of paint. So this is what the shelf looks with its first coat of white, and for some reason this is just what I always do. I like to start from the back of the item first. So for this bread box, yes, I did spray the inside with shellac, a couple coats of shellac too. There wasn't really any stopping point where I could tape off the inside of this box, so it was the whole entire inside was going to have to be painted too. So this is what they all look like with their first coat of white paint. Now, I will tell you that you still need to keep that shellac handy when it bleeds through yellow, even with two coats. Sometimes, as you can see on the spice rack, I'm going to need to apply a third coat and maybe a fourth. So this is what they all looked like with their second coat of white paint. Now on that bread box, I did tape off the back. There was a way that I could tape that off. And then I also did tape off the bottom of it. And the other place I taped off was that little drawer that goes into the spice rack. So after 2 coats of white paint, I could see that the inside of this bread box was yellowing. And I know it's not necessary, it's the back part of it, but I still, look at how that just had a little spot. So that needed another coat of shellac also. Like, you know, these vintage pieces, they just bleed through like that sometimes. So now after 3 coats on the back of these items, I can flip them upside and get that front done. And then touching up, you know, as the back is, if I see any see-through of the darkness. So I just wanted to show you a quick view if you didn't think this looked yellow. Look at me putting this white paint on here now that you can just see how yellow that back of the breadboard was a different material. So it just, you know, it is what it is, but I like it to be all that crisp white. So on the top of this bread box, what I want to show you here is when it comes to those hinges, you want your hinges to fit again, so you don't really, that's going to be covered up by the hinge, so don't put a lot of paint in that area or you will not be able to shut your drawer. So now I think all these pieces have the coats that they need and they're looking nice and white. Now I usually don't do this step. I'm going to seal these in with some polycrylic only because some of them needed quite a few coats of shellac and I didn't do that undercoat of black because they were dark pieces. I just, you know, kitchen pieces, I really want my paint to stay. So I'm just going to give them just 1 coat of this polycrylic because I'm going to be sanding it anyway. So now I knew that I wanted all 3 of these items to have a stencil on them. So for the spice rack, I wanted to use that elixir, but I didn't want the extract. I wanted to keep that sun dry. So where I needed to take a circle shape and kind of estimate where I need the size to be, and then write out my sun dry elixir and follow that circle down, and then that way I get that curved shape that I want. And then I just needed to ungroup these 2 pieces and then I can delete that circle. I'm still using my silhouette. I'm still learning my Cricut, if anybody was wondering out there. So I'm just doing this simple bread for the bread box in the Farmhouse, vintage Farmhouse font. And then I'm using this Antiques and Collectible, and this is just my inspiration. I'm going to be just making my own. So now it's on to distressing these pieces, and I just love, I know distressing is not for everybody, but I absolutely love it. I just love how it accents these little sharp edges. So when I distress, I just have like a heavy hand. I got to push down on that sandpaper, which is a 220 grit, on those edges. And then when I go to make the rest of the piece nice and smooth, I just use a lighter hand and let the sandpaper do the work just to smooth out any of the feel of the brush marks. So here's where you can see that I taped off the bottom of this bread box to leave some of that nice vintage wood. I mean, it's always going to be sitting down, so why waste the paint if it's in good condition? So the one thing I do after removing the paint, there's always like that little hard feel where the paint, you know, hardened and against the tape. So I just like to run some sandpaper when I'm distressing the piece and take off that little edge. So now that I've got them all distressed, all sanded, and I just take a air compressor and blow all that sanding dust off of them. You could use a blow dryer too if you don't have an air compressor, just something to get all that dust off. So now it's on to putting my stencils on. So for this piece of glass, I did that bread, and I'm going to actually use a vinyl stencil on this, and this is going to be its cleaning, so I got to make sure that it's streak free and fingerprint free before I get that bread put on there. So you know, if you vinyled on top of glass, you really only have a quick little second to make sure that everything is even and level. So I'm really trying to eyeball, measure, you know, get this nice in where it is. And so I kind of set the card there where the E needed to be, made sure that it was level, and then stuck that vinyl down. So I know that I took the air compressor to get the dust off, but it is also a good idea before sticking a stencil on something that you previously sanded to take a wet, just a water cloth and wipe off any of the excess sanding and make sure that it's good and dry before adhering your stencil, because sometimes not necessarily some of the dust left does not want the stencil to stick. So same thing here, I'm measuring, I'm trying to make sure that it's good and even before I stick my vinyl stencil down. So I'm just using the apple barrel multi-use that I get at Walmart in the black for my stencil color. And then I'm just using a makeup sponge that I get at the Dollar Tree as my paint applicator, and just doing a little bit of a dabbing where I have a little bit of the paint on and a little bit off. And then I like to take a blow dryer to remove that vinyl, especially since this is previous painted. I don't want to take my previous paint off and it just releases that. And I'm pretty much doing the same exact thing to this shelf, just with the antique and collectibles, just trying my best to my ability to get that stencil nice and level. And I know you think, oh my gosh, you just stenciled that on. Why are you taking that off? I just don't, because I distress the piece to make it look aged. I don't want those crisp letters. So I do, you know, 2 coats of the black to make it so you can see it, but I also distress the piece to kind of make it blend right in. So now to finish these pieces up, I'm giving them their final coat of Varathane finishing wax over the entire piece, including where I stenciled. So now it's time to put back on all those pieces and parts that I removed. And so this little glass piece had these little metal triangles, and I tried to hammer them back out so I could reuse them. And they are extremely sharp, so I'm trying not to grab them too much with my fingers, and I'm just using these needle nose pliers to put them back in. And the same like with the hinges, I knew that I was going to do this, so where the glass was, I made sure that I did not completely fill them in and cover them up. Now, even though this did not have this when I took that off, I'm just gonna lay a bead of hot glue around the edges. I can see that, you know, now that I know this is 2 panes of glass, and you know, it must have been on there very good, but I just thought one more secondary to make sure that this glass is in there good, and then just a little, you know, squirt to make sure that me resticking those little metal pieces, they felt pretty secure to me, but just one extra precaution. So now it's on to putting the chicken wire on my inspiration pieces. So this chicken wire that I'm using here today is from Michael's. When I was looking to buy more, I was having a hard time, and I ran across this at Michael's, and it's the same width that I needed for this spice rack and the shelf, so I thought this was perfect. So now I'm just using these snippers to cut it to the size before stapling it on. Now, because this comes in a roll, you kind of have to stretch it a little bit, and be careful stretching it, because you don't want it, I didn't want it to make it bigger than what the item was that I was putting it on. And so I'm just kind of holding it down and putting my staples into place. But when it comes to stapling on the sides, pretty much every little wire piece will get a staple, because that's what's going to hold it down and hold that sharp edge. So stapling it like this makes it nice and secure, and it gives you a point where you can, because you know the chicken wire is kind of twisted together, so that way I know that it's not going to fall apart, and gives me something so when I'm going to clip off any of the excess and then hammer it down so that it's like, as you see, I bend it, and you know, sometimes the staples, I want to make sure that my product is good and secure. So now one more quick cleaning of this glass, because once I put the chicken wire in place, it's not going to be so easy to clean that glass anymore. So the easiest way I'm finding to do this little round area is, I don't want to do the entire back, because you know, I try really hard to cut it off and hammer it down so there's not a sharp edge. But I really don't know a way to cover up chicken wire. I've tried glue, especially inside the door. I don't want to make a mess of it. So I'm just trying to, as much as the staple gun will allow me to make a circle around, and then I will cut off the excess. So now it's time to put back on the rest of the hardware, those little knobs that were on that spice rack drawer. And this is the part where you'll be happy if you gingerly put just a little bit of paint on those hinge areas so these hinges fit back in place. So time to replace those hinges and make sure that door closes again. And then return that cute little, nice, all cleaned up porcelain knob. What do you think of my Pinterest inspired bread box? My plan was really not to keep that glass at the beginning, but once I saw that it was doubled like that and I would be able to put the stencil in the middle of it, I absolutely love it. And I still that I added the chicken wire to protect that glass. And I like distressing, that's part of what I do. You can't really hurt an item anymore. You just add more character to it. What do you think about my Pinterest inspired spice rack? Now, adding chicken wire to these makes it so you don't actually have to hang it if you don't want to, and you don't actually have to, use it for spices if you don't want to. You can use this for essential oils. I love that it had a little drawer at the bottom of it. I think when putting the sun-dyed elixirs on it, just keeps it very neutral. Or this all-purpose shelf. Now you have your collectibles right on here, as I have my little creamers that I just can't pass up. I love the chicken wire. I think it even accents these little creamers a little bit more. And there again, you don't have to put it on the wall with that chicken wire because stuff won't fall through that way. So what do you think about adding the wording on the top? And have I inspired you to look at thrift store finds in a different way? So I thank you so much for watching today's video. Which of the three were your favorites? Are you a fan of chicken wire? Do you like stenciling? Do you not like the distress? I absolutely love the distress because I don't think you can hurt it anymore and just add more character to it. So remember, the link to Sonia's channels are down in my description box, along with the playlist of all who participated in this Pinterest inspired DIY. Again, I thank you so much for watching. If you're part of my YouTube family that has helped me grow, thank you so much. And if you'd like to consider being part of that YouTube family, just hit that subscribe button. Thanks again so much.